Okay, let's see. Next item. Oh, yes. So, another data point that I got from the informant is that let's wait until this guy moves. By the way, something strange happened. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay. Yeah, so this other item, right? This is something I got from the former mayor like 2 weeks ago. He told me that that thing with the health inspector of Fort Bend County is not an isolated thing. It's related to the same lawsuit of Phil Denning and the Robert Markel, Weinberg, Haley, PC, right? The idea is to plant something in an official record of Fort Bend County saying that I am unresponsive and that I don't respect the rules and that I am a nuisance, right? That my houses are a nuisance in multiple neighborhoods, right? Not only in Lake Point Estates, but also in the Cinco Ranch 2 HOA, right? Because I have two houses that are nearby. I mean, they're maybe 10 miles from each other. So that's why that thing was important to them. And that's why the director of that health department emailed me directly. An email that was kind of a strong worded. Like he was saying like, we're giving you enough time to fix this and you haven't fixed this nuance. And he mentioned the word nuance multiple times in the email. So according to the informant, this is not random. This is fabrication of evidence, right? So they are planting something in something that has an official seal, like the health department. So I'm a health hazard, basically, right? It's the picture they want to paint. And this is important for them to justify the unjustifiable, right? Putting me in jail for a $3,000 fine that they fabricated for me asserting my right to private property against the trespasser, right, who was Phil Denning, right? So the justification is gonna be something like, well, it's not so much about the money, it's that he's such a nuisance that we have to use this to get him out, right? Because he's obviously a nuisance everywhere he goes, right? Something like that. But anyhow, it's silly because Well, now I didn't want to say this on the first part because I was going to file the documents and I didn't want to give them any advantage. But now that I filed them, I'll say it, right? So they made a huge mistake, huge. Yeah, I don't know if people have seen the movie Pretty Woman when she says big mistake, something like that. So this is what they did, right? So they created another order, right, for contempt. Right, finding me in contempt for this $3,000, right? What do you want, baby? But this order was a Frankenstein order, right? I mean, what they did was pretty, I don't know, ingenious is not the word, but was very inventive, right? So this is what they did. They have an order from October 1st, right? October 1st, 2025, which is the order for enforcement, where they sued me, and because they had stopped the mail at my home, and they never served me the document, I never even knew that this happened, right? The same thing that happened in April, where they create an order, but they don't tell me. I'm talking about the secret TRO that Judge Richard Bell signed, and then they disappear from the docket, the index number 7 in the trial court, right, in the Telfair court. So here they did the same, right? They created that order in October, but they did not serve it to me, and I didn't know that this order existed, right? So what they did is that and this was the law firm, right? The Robert Markels, Weinberg, Haley, PC. They created another order, now for contempt, which is probably the one that they want to use to put me in jail. And they created this order, but when they docketed it's not signed by a judge, right? So it's a proposed order. But when they docketed it, and I know this because I have printouts of the docket, it says order. They didn't docket it as proposed order. They docketed it as order. Okay. So if you read the docket, you think that this is an order for contempt. Okay, but it's not really an order, it's a proposed order, okay? And then they served me with documents, but what they did is that they printed the two orders. So they printed the order from October, which is an order for judgment, right? Ordered me to pay $3,000. And the proposed order for contempt. And then they shuffled the papers together in a way that the signature of October ended up in the order of January, right? So they're sending me this as if this is an enforceable order for contempt, meaning we can put you in jail now, right? And they docketed the order as an order in the docket, right? So the play is, if they're gonna go to that hearing, and after the hearing they're gonna call the Fort Bend police and show them the docket, and the police is not going to read the order, right? Like, they're gonna just see the docket, and it says contempt order, put him in jail. And that justifies the Fort Bend Police Department jailing me, right? Because the docket says that it's an order. It's not really an order, it's a proposed order, right? So they have this weapon that they can use to put me in jail at any time that they want, right? But it's not really an order. It's an order, it's a Frankenstein order. It's a proposed order from January 2026 combined with a signature on another order from 2025. They combine the two things together and they create something that looks like a signed order. And they docket it, right? They docketed the proposed order. But a police officer is not going to read and analyze the docket. He's just going to enforce whatever the lawyer and the judge tells them to do, right? So that's what they did, right? But this is, of course, a crime because they're tampering with the docket. This is 20 years in prison, right? And not only that, it shows collusion because it's exactly the same technique, tactic, and procedure that Judge Telfair, Troy Pickett, and William Kite Adams have been using in the other court, also from Fairburn County, for 10 months at this point, right? The same thing, creating a void order, not serving it to me, and then seeking enforcement and contempt. It's the same playbook, exactly the same. And not only that, they did that thing where they scheduled the hearing that is supposedly going to be on the 12th of February. They scheduled it on January the 7th, which is exactly the same date in which Troy Pickett scheduled his hearing for contempt on the other court for another void order, right? So this shows coordination, and not only coordination, that they are tactically deploying the exact same playbook twice in 2 different courts. This is horrible. I mean, this is, for a prosecutor, I imagine, right? I'm not a prosecutor, but I imagine for a prosecutor, this would be like, I guess they would giggle, right, if they see something like this, right? Like, it would give them some sort of internal happiness, right? Rejoice. I don't know how to say that in English. It would be a prosecutor's dream, right, to find this evidence, right? This proof of collusion and coordination. But this is a horrible mistake, because now this opened the door for me to sue Phil Denning, the HOA, and the directors in the lawsuit for violation of civil rights. And this opens the door for me for discovery of all their emails over the last 18 months or so, right? And I'm telling you this, judges, because if they start destroying the emails at this very moment, it is possible that the FBI or the DOJ could be watching and destroying the emails knowingly to avoid prosecution. Is a crime. It's a serious crime. So don't destroy the emails. Save them to me, because I'm going to ask for discovery of all the emails of Phil Denning, all of them, work and personal, because he is conducting this thing as if it was his. There's no separation of office and residence for Phil Denning. He is conducting rounds in front of my house at all times of the day, 9 a.m., 12 a.m., 2 p.m. He doesn't have any other work except doing this, right? So I have the right to discover all his email and all his communications. So it's a horrible mistake. And this, of course, opens the door for me legally to discover things about Robert Mueller, because Robert Mueller has to be in those emails, right? So that's what I was filing, right? And Robert Mueller, don't think that Robert Mueller is just the director of the FBI, the former director. Robert Mueller is a co-worker of Greg Abbott. Like, he's been working with Greg Abbott for decades, right? In the political arenas, in the intelligence arenas, in multiple areas, right? In the party where they, the political party that they belong to. And I don't want to make this a political thing, but like, they are colleagues, right? They are not. So imagine, Greg Abbott has my child kidnapped with the courts of Texas, and Phil Denning is part of the homeowners association that is harassing me. I mean, what other proof of collusion do you need, right? So this thing of the February 12th hearing was a huge mistake. It's probably one of the worst mistakes they've made so far. So now I filed the 5th amended complaint, and I sent it directly to the Chief Justice of the Southern District of Texas. And Judge Hittner is named in the complaint, right? So I don't know. It feels like they are just. It feels like they're trying to self-destroy. You know, like when I saw this morning, I thought, maybe. I don't know. This is just me thinking, right? Maybe Troy Pickett and the other lawyers from the Robert Marcus Weinberg PC are already working for the FBI, because it feels like they are trying to destroy themselves. Like, they're throwing themselves under the bus. There's no other way to put this. Honestly, I don't find any other explanation. Right? Maybe they are informants of the FBI, and they're just helping me. I don't know. But it's one for the books, that's for sure. So I filed that. I, of course, filed a motion to vacate. So what I was saying on the first part, I was being nice. Of course, it's not true. I'm not being nice. I'm being naughty, right? To Judge Hittner. I'm putting him in a position where he has nowhere to go. Because the latest development is that he denied his own motion to recuse. I mean, the motion to recuse himself, he denied it when he's a defendant on the action. Imagine that, right? It's like, this is the kind of thing that you see in Venezuela. That's what I always tell people, right? That want to talk to me about this thing. Like when Diosdado Cabello named Rafael Ramirez president of the oil company and minister of energy, right? I mean, he was at the same time the person that was supposed to be regulated by the government, and he was at the same time the head of that institution in the government. Imagine, I mean, there's no bigger conflict of interest than that. But they do it, right? They did it because this leads to corruption, and this leads to loyalty, right? So it's the same. In this case, Judge Hittner, he is defendant and judge, right? But anyhow, so I dropped that. So it was 3 documents. It was the the renewed motion to recuse, but this time addressed directed sent to the Chief Justice, right? Because this requires administrative action. Some administrator in this court has to put things in order, because this is obviously a disaster, right? As a court. I mean, where a judge is defendant and judge, and he denies motions and issues orders that benefits himself directly. I mean, please. And I also filed an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order against Phil Denning and the association of the Lake Point Estates homeowners associations, right? So the directors, to prevent them from harassing me with that other trial court of Fort Bend, right? Because this is the second court that they're going to use to harass me. So I filed those 3 instruments, and of course all of them directed, or not directed, but like addressed to the chief of the Southern District of Texas, because there's no other solution, right? Then the clerk is naming the lawsuit, and the judge as well. So who is going to issue the summonses, right? That's the question. But again, I think, I don't know. That BMW blue, I think an X's is an interceptor. Is passing in front of the Adams automotive at this very moment. The BMW blue. Exit 761B, more or less. Okay, let's see what other items we have here. Yeah, so the last item was that, sorry, I diverted from the conversation a little bit, but the item was that the health inspector of Fort Bend County wasn't a random thing, right? It was coordination to create evidence for field denning, basically. And I got that information according to this, on January 29, according to my log, in the morning. Okay, let's go to the next item. Okay, I think I wrote about this on YouTube. So I also got the information that when the incident of January 25th happened, right? January 25, 2026, this was at 6 p.m. or so. After I published the book mentioning Greg Abbott again, the Venezuelan intelligence trying to harm me at the Kroger using the bag handler, the guy that puts the groceries on the bag. And this is supposedly where, now I think, according to what he told me, it was the coffee that got contaminated and the cornflakes. So after that happened, I mentioned it, when I got the information, I mentioned it on YouTube, right? And the informant told me the next day, I think it was, that the Venezuelan operatives, like the managers here in Katy, got reprehended in a way. And the reason was because they had not been authorized to kill me. Literally, that's what the informant told me. I mean, it's not that they were reprehended for trying to kill me. They were reprehended for not being authorized to. So apparently, there is a parallel type of capital punishment here in Texas, but it requires approval, right? And apparently, mentioning Greg Abbott in a book qualifies for that capital punishment, but it requires approval. It's not a free card. Like the Venezuelan intelligence need approval for this, right? And they did not get the approval. So they got reprehended, apparently. But I guess we'll know this when inevitably I give that coffee to the FBI, right? And again, it's not about the potential harm to me. It's about the children that were in that store at that moment next to me while I was picking that coffee, right? That's what we need to concentrate on, the children. And field denning is in this same lawsuit, right? Oh, speaking about the health inspector, I checked the locks on the fence, and the locks are not broken, so they did not break in. But that means that they had to have fabricated the report, because how can they inspect the pool without testing the water? They have to test the water to see if it's contaminated or not. Not even, they can say visually, because I could have put color on the water. How do they know that if it has an abnormal color, it's not blue? How do they know that it's because of contaminants? It's not aesthetic. They don't have to wait. They have to test the water. They have to test the pH and the bacteria in the water. And how can they do that from outside? Right? So they probably fabricated that report. Unless they jump over the fence, right? But that would be trespassing. So I don't know. It's a tricky one for them. And again, this is a department that depends on directly, right, on the jurisdictions of Greg Abbott, the person that I reported to the IRS, what I was describing before. So he not only sent the judges, he also sent the health department, right, and the police of Fort Bend. Oh, this is funny. On the hearing of January 22nd, I think it was, right? So that hearing where Troy Pickett was trying to find me in contempt, right? That's the weapon these days, contempt of court. In that hearing, right? So I entered the room and he's already sitting beyond the threshold, right? Where the attorneys sit. And I see him, right? I recognize him because his picture is in my book. I know who he is, right? So what I did is that I sat on the first row right behind him, right? I did this strategically. I thought for two reasons, right? One, he won't be able to see me unless he looks for me, right? And secondly, it puts him in an awkward position because if he starts talking to the judge about me, he has to turn around, right? To look at me or to point at me, right? So, I don't know, it creates inconvenience physically, right, for him. So I did that. But anyhow, the hearing hasn't started yet. And I start talking to my former partner in low voice. Like we're talking about something mundane. I don't recall what it was, right? But the minute I opened my mouth and said 2 or 3 words, Troy Pickett jumped out of his seat. And he turned around and looked at me, right? So he recognized my voice immediately. It was like an arc reflect, you know, like something he could not control. Like, I don't want to say scared, but like he jumped as surprised, right? Like he was surprised by the tone of my voice alone. So this tells me that he has been watching my videos, right? Because otherwise how he would know that it was me who was talking? I've never talked to him in my life. I mean, verbally, right? But this is probably visible in the cameras. I mean, it's not a smoking gun, but you know, it's compelling, right? Circumstantial evidence that he's aware that, you know, of everything that I'm claiming, right? Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to tell you is about that. So that thing that they were doing, right, with the HOA. That I said that it was a stretch because it's a company, right? So what they did is that they sent some of the letters via registered mail to the company, and and I mentioned this in demo D98 maybe a month ago, right? They addressed it to the company, and below they put registered agent Reynaldo Aguiar, my name, right? Which is a lie. This company is registered in Delaware, and by law, the registered agent has to be physically present in Delaware, right? It cannot be me. But they're doing this to pierce the corporate veil, right? To find me personally liable for contempt and put me in jail, because they can put the company in jail, right? So, but the other thing they did that is worth mentioning is in the certificate of service. This attorney that signs this thing from this law firm that Phil Denning is using, or has been using for the last 18 months to harass me, in the certificate of service, he addressed it to the company and the registered agent Reynaldo Aguiar. So he explicitly put my name in the certificate of service, which, you know, first of all, I'm not the registered agent, and even if I was, he has no way to know that, because that information is not public, right? And I've never disclosed that to him or anybody in the HOA, to anybody in general, right? I've never put my name next to the name of the company anywhere, right? So he has no way to know this. But he put that in the certificate of service. And this is just a way for them to create a pretext to put me in prison for something that is a matter about a company, not a person. But I find this funny because now the one who's going to pierce the corporate veil of, you know, that Phil Denning is using to hide himself is me. Because he is been patrolling, and I have recording of him patrolling the front of my house at all times of the day during weekdays, right? So he has no other job but to do this, to harass me. So the one who's going to pierce that veil is me, not them. And I'm going to get all the personal emails. That's my goal. And I'm gonna make it a point. It doesn't matter how much money I spend on that. I'm gonna make it a point to get all his emails, all of them, for at least a year and a half. That's going to be my New Year's resolution. But beyond the, more than the actual mechanics of the legal skirmish, right? I would like to go more to the higher level of thinking, right? Like it's the same mistake, like they don't learn. They don't learn from the mistakes. They kept doing the only thing they know how to do, which is legal harassment, right? It just happened to them with the traffic citation, right? Now the the bailiff of the court, the clerk are part of the case, right? And they're going to flip on the judge. That's obvious, right? Because they have the most liability and the least protections. So they're going to flip eventually, right? And now they made the same mistake, right? And now they exposed not only Phil Denning, but also the wife of Larry Ryan, for example, who is in the committee that was supposed to complain about design, the architectural committee, right? The committee that is responsible for enforcing these rules, for which they're suing me, is the wife of Larry Ryan, who is one of the most prominent agents because he controls the energy and water supply, right, of multiple cities. So I mean, it's just stupid, petty harassment. Doing this petty harassment makes it possible for me to sue these high-level people. And this is what I was telling in one of the demos that is in the books about the same level attack, right? They don't, at this point, they are not even respecting that concept. They are harassing a low-level person like me with these high-level people like Greg Abbott, Robert Mueller, the judges, Larry Ryan. You see, it's stupid. It's stupid because they're gonna get destroyed, especially because I have the database, right? Anyhow, this is going to be one for the books. I'm sure of that. And remember, the level of liability is high because they have attempted to harm children at Kroger, and I have proof of that. It's crazy. What you're doing is irrational at this point. I repeat, stop, cease and desist. And if you want to make it up to me, send the negotiator, Penelope. I think that could be a good solution. Anyhow, I think I delivered most of the items. I still have some, but the text is too long and I'm driving, I don't want to get distracted. So I just delivered the items that had short descriptions that I could read quickly. I'll cross over them and do the other ones in a real demo, right? In the computer. I'm gonna just play some music now. There's another thing that was pretty funny, and I don't know, this is, I'm getting the impression that the informant is, I don't know, I think the informant may have other resources. Let's put it that way, right? Because he made a joke when I was running, right? He made a joke. I mean, it's a dark joke. I'm gonna say it because I think it's kind of funny in this context, right? But I'm not making fun of what happened in these things. But what he said is that because of I guess that he heard what what I said yesterday, right? He said that if these judges keep doing this, they could end up being a combination of that judge that I was talking about yesterday. I think the last name was Williams, right? Let me see. What was the name? The one that the judge here in Texas that killed the co-workers out of revenge, right? So the informant, I can't recall the name, right? But the informant told me that, I mean, he made kind of the joke that this situation could end up being a combination of that and the Tylenol killer. You remember the Tylenol killer, the one that was tampering with the Tylenols at the pharmacies and killed I don't know how many people with that? Well, something like that, right? Because these judges are participating in a network that is tampering with food and pharmacy items, right? And they're doing it out of revenge. So, it could be a combination of the two cases. Now, I don't know what happened to the Tylenol killer, to be honest. I know somebody was arrested, but I saw a documentary once and the person seemed to be free, if I recall correctly. So I think maybe he already served his sentence. I don't know. Let me see. Yeah, so the case was the Chicago Tylenol murders in 1982. Right, but it's the same technique, tampering with something you're going to ingest at the point of sale, right, or in the distribution chain of that point of sale. So it would be like a mix of the modus operandi of the Tylenol killers, but combined with the profession and the motivation of the judge that was put in death row here in Texas. So if you combine the two cases, you have this, right? That's the joke. Well, actually, this is worse because the Tylenol killer, he was targeting adults. Like he was poisoning the Tylenol for adults, not for children. Right? He didn't touch the children Tylenol. It was only the full dose, right? The one that he tampered with. But these people are tampering things indiscriminately. Cereal, right? Like children eat cereal. A child could have eaten that cornflake, right? So this is worse, I think, than the combination of the Tylenol killers and the judge. This is way worse. I mean, liability speaking. And no, this is way worse. I think I'm falling short on comprehending how worse this is compared to that. Because they're federal judges in this network, right? And they have to be familiar with the federal sentencing guidelines. I mean, it's their job to know the guidelines. They cannot, how can they say that they didn't know the implications of this? Now, the other judge that got sentenced to death, he wasn't a federal judge. I think he was like a Judge Telfair, something like that, right? So really, he had no obligation to know and understand the sentencing guidelines of the federal government. Although, he's a judge, he should know, right? But, It wasn't his job, at least, right? But I mean, there's judges in this network that are federal judges, and it's their job to know those guidelines, and still they're participating in this. One thing that I didn't have in my notes, but it's something that was picked up by the system, is that yesterday something strange happened. In a few occasions, it was the case that they park vehicles in a way, I don't know how, it's hard for me to describe it really, but I'm gonna try. Imagine in this moment, right? My car is traveling in this direction. Imagine that you park a vehicle as if it was traveling on the opposite direction diagonally, right? So the camera on the back of the car would record my car with an angle of, say, 45 degrees from the back. And this started happening yesterday. I mean, before yesterday, there weren't many observations like this, right? And this is just a theory, right? I don't know if this is the case. But it could be because I installed the infrareds, the lateral ones, with an angle pointing forward. And I did this on purpose, right? Because I want to blind the cameras that they have perpendicular but ahead of me, right? So I have to point diagonally a little bit, right? I cannot put it 90 degrees because then it would be too late. They would see the front of the car. So I have to blind them in advance, right? But because I have this infrared with this specific angle, this makes it so that if you are recording the car from the back with an angle of, say, 45 degrees, then that camera wouldn't get blinded by the infrared, right? One example of this was yesterday, what I think was yesterday, right? No, 2 days ago, when I was driving behind the Amazon warehouse. There's a police station that has an antenna there, and I was going to that antenna, but they had it captured. So in that area, they did this, right, with a truck. And there's like 2 or 3 other examples. Another one was in this street in front of like where the supermarket is, that is the Harvest Market, right? In that street, they did the same thing with another truck. So it seems like it's a way to avoid the infrared. That's the theory, right? Just mentioning in case you see these trucks parked in this very specific and distinctive way. It could be a way to, it could be a signal for detection, right? I still have to test it to see if it works, but it seems like it could be a signal for detection. All right, we're back.